I'm trying to think if it might be helpful if I ran the slides. If you could keep, we're gonna unlock the door when, probably soon actually. But if I ran the slides, if you could keep an eye out, just make sure that no one else is coming in, just the building in general. Yeah, and just let them know like, hey, this is for a committee meeting, the center itself is not open for guests.
We can put sign on the side that's not open. That's still be there.
Yeah, is there a sign?
Do they have that?
It'll be okay. I hope. Oh. Oh. What is that coming from? Okay. No. I'm on mute. My computer's on mute.
So you can read it.
Well, oh, turn that one on, yeah. Oh, got it, got it.
Can you hear me?
I can hear.
Hello, hello.
Ah,
Are you hearing that reverb, that echo?
yes. That's going on. There, is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
It's still a little bit there.
I'm muted now. Okay. But what's still picking me up? Wait, mute that.
The actual microphone.
No, is it? What am I hearing myself through? The speaker's loud. Okay. Testing.
Hello, Commissioner Trisella, can you hear us?
I can. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great.
I don't know. Wait, is that it? That might have been it. Okay.
Hang on.
Oh, I raised my hand. Okay. Let's try this again. Sorry, you're going to need to do the thing again. All right. Oh, no, it's working. Kind of. Okay. Commissioner Bragalone is running a little behind today. She had a family thing pop up. So we're just going to give her a minute. Can you do the thing again? So there's like two speaker options, like on my computer.
Glenn,
Sir,
is the meeting for 4:30 or 4 o'clock?
4 o'clock. That's when Commissioner Jackson said was probably the best time for her. But Commissioner Bragalone is running just a scotch behind today from a family situation she was dealing with earlier, but she's on her way.
No problem, no problem. I just thought maybe I had got it confused. All right, thanks.
You're welcome. Hi, Commissioner Daniel, how are you?
Doing well. Apologies for being tardy to the party.
That's all right. We're starting a little late today. Commissioner Bragalone is still on her way after having to deal with some stuff. So we are just taking it as it goes. Hi, Commissioner Jackson. Hi, Commissioner Hello. Oh my God, everyone's here.
No.
Commissioner Bragalone should be here very shortly. Chair Bragalone, excuse me. How's y'all's weekend?
Well, we had just gotten the children back to school when they decided that there was no more school. So the weekend started on Thursday. But the
Wasn't it
snow here
fun?
wasn't, no, the snow here was not good enough in Dallas. So my in-laws, my sister-in-law and brother-in-law just moved here up to Denton, and they had real snow. So instead of staying here where there was no snow, my children made us travel up north to chase the snow. So I drove and lived at my in-laws' house all weekend so that
Oh,
my
that's
children
fun.
could have snow. I hate snow, just for the record. Um, it was fun. They were beautiful. It was cute. They made really great snow people. And also, never have I ever thought that I would chase snow in Texas.
Well, sorry about that. No, I was excited for like getting back into like a regular week. Like after 2 weeks of just really
Yes.
crazy, yes, it was like we had 5 Mondays, 5 Fridays, 5 Sundays. Like it
Yes.
was over and over again. I was like, great, let's start. And then Thursday rolls around. I'm like, awesome. We have to
Yep.
redo everything.
Yep. I was genuinely ready for regular. I was ready for regular.
Mhm.
Back in school, like the schedule will start, even if scheduling means that I have to wake up early, but it's fine because I know when I'm waking up and what I'm doing. And then I didn't.
Well, hopefully this week will be better. And then we'll have Monday off. So,
Well, some people have Monday off.
oh, well, we have Monday off. So,
Yeah, y'all do. I work for myself. So
There's no days off.
we all make choices.
No, some of us are just smarter than others. And I am right there with you with working for yourself.
Ugh.
Good
I did that for a year. And then someone's like, you want to work for the city? Yeah, 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 I do. In fact,
I know I worked for the city of Irving, and I used to say that it's the one job that I always ask for forgiveness and then permission.
oh, yeah, there you go.
It did not go. It did not go well. So I got my hands slapped a lot. Hey, do you guys know? Do we fund any groups that are affiliated with Taiwan? I can't
Just give us a
remember.
quick moment. Glenn went to go open the door for Chair Bragalone.
Oh, okay.
So apologies. I'm gonna pass it to you fairly quickly. agenda.
Yes.
Going from this to this. Right from here to here. You like we did.
Oh. That's not right.
Okay, it's from here to here, right?
Those are the minutes from last
Okay.
here. We're doing our minutes, and then here's our COP, and our first is here.
Yeah, but we're not going to vote until you bring.
Right, yes, that's
Right.
correct. I'm sorry.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. My apologies. I have two family emergencies going on right now, so my apologies for keeping you waiting. We do have a quorum, and you now have a chair who is present. So I call this meeting of the Allocations Committee to order at 4:18 p.m. Our first order of business is approval of the December 16th Allocations Committee meeting minutes that was included in your packet. Do I have a motion related to the minutes?
I move that we accept as presented.
Do I have a second?
I second, Madam Chair.
We have a motion from Commissioner Truzilla and a second from Commissioner Jackson. Is there any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Is there any opposition? The motion has passed unanimously. The first item on our agenda are the proposed changes for the fiscal year 25-26 Cultural Organization Program Guidelines. I'll remind everybody we had a pretty in-depth discussion about these at our specially called December meeting. And the office staff in general, and Glenn in particular, has worked very hard to incorporate all of those changes. So they were all in the packet that came out to you with plenty of time to review it. But at this point, I'm going to pass the mic and recognize Assistant Director Ayers to walk us through those changes. I'm going to ask that we hold questions until they are invited by Assistant Director Ayers.
You sound so fancy.
I know.
All right. So we did discuss this, and I did my best to incorporate all of your comments and questions and input from our last meeting. So a little timeline of where we're at with COP is we will have our meeting today to vote to recommend these guidelines, ideally, and then we will meet on Thursday to vote and recommend the guidelines at full commission. What we'll do is send out an updated draft. Right now they have essentially the same draft that you do that we sent out last Friday. We'll send out an updated draft, ideally tomorrow morning, if there are any sort of amendments to what we're looking at now, before we vote to recommend. And then we will brief by memo, as of right now, to the Quality of Life Committee in next Tuesday, January 21st. They also have the current draft, and we will send them an updated draft on Friday after commission. I don't believe that the actual committee has the draft yet. It's sitting with ACM Liz. And then February 26th is when City Council will be presented these guidelines for approval. And then the application opens March 3rd for COP, which time is an illusion. I don't understand how we're already kind of there. Anyway, that's where we're at with the timeline. Also, Julia should be back by then, so great. So I don't have to do this anymore. All right. Oh, I'm doing this. Okay, next slide. All right. So what we'll do is we're going to go through these sort of in page order as best that addresses your questions and comments and input from our last meeting. These are sort of these major changes throughout. I do want to give a nice shout out and thank you to Commissioner Truzilla for her overarching sort of revisions that she went through for just grammar and just checking those sort of small things. I really, really appreciated that. That was a nice way to sort of get regrounded in the guidelines overall while we worked on these revisions. So thank you for that. So we'll just go through and talk about these, and then I'll open it up for some more questions. Sound good?
That's good.
Great. So you'll see in this, as we go through this, these this table, slow down, Glenn. All right, as we go through this table, you'll see on the left column, we have the revision, sort of just a brief summary of what that is, the pages that I'll be referencing that this revision takes place on, and then notes, so I can help describe what we're changing. So this first one, changes in order information, this is just across the full draft itself. As I was going through kind of updating this, I wanted to find a way to make this a little bit more readable. We do this kind of every year, right, to try to continue to adjust to make the information a little bit more digestible. And so I changed the section of about COP to include eligibility, funding level restrictions, and source of funding and new applicants, because that's specific to the program at large, not necessarily just FY 25-26, if that makes sense, right? These are just broad programmatic information. And then in the actual section for FY 25-26 COP, I've included that specific information for the year, which includes the timeline and then information that this is the year one of the 3-year program for COP. And then I've reorganized the review panel process, scoring, and selection and funding allocation process to kind of, as you read, take you through what it actually looks like to run through the application and selection process, right? So you learn about the review panel process, and then you learn about scoring, which is what the review panel is doing, what OAC admin is doing. And then, based off of your scoring, you're going to learn about what it means to be selected and funded through the program. So that's sort of the thought process on that. Just ordering and how the flow of the document reads. Okay. Pages 6 and 9, we talk about that core programming. So we discussed this in our last meeting about how, as we look through a 3-year program, how we measure our organizations and to make sure that they're still providing a consistent level of programming year over year. And so what we will do is ask them, what is your core service or programming on an annual basis, right? Are you producing 5 main stage or 3 main stage and 2 outreach, right? Something broad and general like that. So when we ask them to re-up for the following year, we ask them, what is your core programming for this upcoming year? And so we can sort of do a side-by-side comparison to make sure that based off of their funding level, that they're still providing a similar, right, or comparable amount of services based off of their funding, right? So this exists in the application checklist. So the proposal itself will ask for the organizations or programming. And then in the review panel scoring under public benefit, the review panel will also be looking at the proposal that the applicant clearly describes for programs and services offered to Dallas residents and visitors. So it's just really calling those out. Page 8, we have the impact of changing tiers. I believe this was Commissioner Spellacy who sort of brought this up. And what it means when an organization goes from one tier to another. And so I've added clarifying language on page 8 on what that looks like. And I just copied and pasted the language here, which says, note, a change from one tier to another will change the grouping of organizations in which a given organization will be reviewed by the review panel. Changing tiers may also change specific OAC administrative scoring criteria. Please refer to the administrative scoring section under scoring below, right? So again, depending on if they change from one tier to another, their staff diversity might change, their board diversity requirements might change, but this way it's very much calling that out, right? All right. On page 9, under panel scoring, we mentioned this, I mentioned this in the last meeting where I had removed it, and then I thought that I should add it back in now that we had that conversation. But it's the overall recommendation by a panelist, right? So it doesn't have a score number to it, but instead it's just a yes or no question. Would you recommend that this organization be a recipient of Dallas taxpayer dollars through the Cultural Organizations Program in the 25-26 year? So one, it's nice to have that yes, right? Kind of regardless of the score that a panelist gives. If they're saying, overall, I see the general benefit of this organization receiving these dollars, but it also sets us up for those off-cycle years, as we discussed in our last meeting, that we will still have for new applicants on an off-cycle year, we'll still have a panel for those applicants because they'll go through the full process, but they'll be grouped into one as opposed to in tiers like we do on a full year one process, right? And so as a means of regulating that scoring process from one size organization to another, that panel is telling us, yes, I think that this organization should be in this program, right? So it's just another way of giving that panel a very clear way of supporting that decision in that organization. All right, moving on. Probably had too much coffee today. Funding levels are not guaranteed. This was, I believe, a comment from Commissioner Trezilla to make it very, very clear as we move into this proposed year one of a 3-year cycle, that funding levels are not guaranteed. So I've added language that says, be advised that prior year funding allocations are not guaranteed in the FY25-26 funding allocation process and may be changed based on the aforementioned factors. So on that same page, those factors are listed as applicant scoring, funding projections, contract compliance, fiscal standing of applying organizations, and standing compared to peer organizations. So I think that really helps drive that home. Still on page 12, significant changes in operation. This kind of goes back to the core program we were talking about before. The application will ask about core programming, examples of reasons for decreased funding. I've added a number 5 there that says a returning applicant whose core operation and or programming drastically changes. And that's in reference to some specific examples that an organization may be disqualified from receiving funding or received decreased funding from previous years. You'll see that at the top of that list of 5 on page 12. Okay. Page 16, language emphasizing compliance. Let me go to that page as well. So now we're in the COP as a multi-year program sort of section of the guidelines. I believe this is in the off-cycle applications under returning applicants. It's literally this text that you'll see here. It'll be in sort of right in the middle, right there. During off-cycle years, administrative scoring and compliance. Oh, this is also sort of back to Commissioner Trezilla, and I think more than just her, driving home the fact that we really need to focus on administrative scoring, especially coming out of this last year. How do we make this stronger of an impact? So administrative scoring and compliance will hold more significance in the applicant review and funding allocation process to emphasize the importance of contract compliance, fiscal compliance, and adherence to cultural policy diversity criteria. OAC will intend to support each organization that successfully reapplies by the deadline with approximately similar funding that they received the year before if the organization earns at least 70% of administrative points. So looking at those off years, right, we've already done our panel, so we have those panel scores from the year one when we sort of did that process, but we're just looking at those administrative scores for years 2 and 3. So 70% is 35 out of 50 points, right? And so if we look at that administrative scoring that is sort of proposed at the end of this document, you'll look that it's all based off of contract compliance, financial compliance, and adherence to cultural policy diversity criteria. So this is our way of addressing how are we leveraging our scoring processes in years 2 and 3 to emphasize the fact that this kind of compliance is key and very, very important, as opposed to that year 1 where it's that 70-30 point split, right? So this is sort of our proposed way of addressing that. I think that might be, oh, that's not it. All right, I have a feeling that's what we're going to end up talking a lot about, but moving on, I've highlighted this orange because this was a change that I made after you received your draft. It's just a general kind of minor change of clarity. Maintaining program eligibility. On page 16, we have be advised that all applicants returning or new must maintain program eligibility each year of the 3-year cycle as laid out in the program eligibility section of each year's city council approved guidelines, right? So as a note, all of these guidelines in years 1, 2, and or 3 have to and will go to city council for approval, right? So everything about our process is the same for you as allocations reviewing it, commission reviewing it, quality of life reviewing it, city council reviewing it, all of it, for all the guidelines every year, right? What we're doing is just changing the administrative process that we'll do panels on that year 1, and then years 2 and 3, we focus in on those administrative scores. But every organization must maintain eligibility throughout the entire time, every year, regardless, right? All right, and then page 16 and 17, new organization off-cycle applicant eligibility clarification. So this was, I think we had multiple comments, providing information and clarity on how new organizations can apply in those off-cycle years, so years 2 and 3. And so I've just provided information on how those organizations can apply. It's under new applicants for off-cycle applications in that section. And basically what it's saying is if they are an eligible organization, they can apply in an off-cycle year. They go through the full application process with a panel review. And then they will have to repeat that same full process whenever the year 1 comes back, which if this goes through would be the FY 28-29 year will be the new, 1 year or first year of the 3-year cycle again. And that's it. Those are the main takeaways that we had from our last meeting from all of the notes that I took. And so I will now turn it back over.
Questions? Commissioner Hornbuckle.
Yes, and I apologize that I did not make that meeting. So a lot of this is, I probably have questions that's probably already been answered, so I apologize. Going back to the comment where the panelists has to say yes, how would that be factored in? So is that considered a vote? Is that considered just commentary? How would that be considered? Does it have to be unanimous?
It just like their scoring, as that would take place individually per each panelist. Each panelist will answer that question. Would you recommend this organization be a recipient of dollars and be essentially included into the program?
So you get an amount for a yes. Is that correct? You get
No, there's no association. Really what it I think is going to help us out with is for those off-cycle years, because we will group all new applicants together into one panel process. And so essentially we'll have multiple tier organizations, multiple size organizations, all applying under one panel, right? And of course we will make sure that the panel is very clear on sort of the different size and capacities of each organization to, address that, we're not trying to compare, as an example, right, Writers Garrett to the DMA as far as size and capacity goes. We'll do a really good job of grounding them in that. But instead, during those years, because they're not looking at like size organizations only, I think it will be beneficial to get that sort of thumbs up from the panelists to say, yes, we recommend this organization to join the program. I am not married to this particular question, which is why initially I removed it. But I do think it might be helpful, especially on those off years, to say, yes, we have some funding to bring in new organizations. Our panel here has said, yes, they think that this organization is deserving into this program on top of their score, of course, right? And so it was just that kind of extra approval, if that makes sense.
So is it basically an extra piece of information for the office, but it's not used in the scoring metric?
That's correct. There's no scoring points associated with it. It's, I think, more of an administrative.
So I think you might think of it as a tiebreaker, sort of thing. Like, let's say you had, and tell me if I'm wrong about this, but let's say you had, let's say we had extra money and we had 10 organizations apply, and we had 5 of them that score well enough to come into the program. But if of those 5, you had a number of no's, that would cause you to pause a little bit.
Mhm.
Or if you had yeses for all 10, like I kind of share Commissioner Hornbuckle's question, kind of concern about if you're going to ask a question, what are you going to do with it?
It's a great point, and again, I'm not necessarily married to this. I thought because this is brand new, this process, I'm trying to anticipate things that we haven't gone through yet, essentially. And so maybe this is not a question we include this year, but maybe it's something we include next year.
Well, I
Or
would
that
just
cycle.
kind of encourage you to think through of things like, let's say, for example, what are you going to do with those answers? Let's say you get a bunch of no's for an organization that scores really well. It doesn't seem like you would, but
Yeah,
what do you do
that's
if you
true.
get those no's? Or what if you get yeses? What if everybody resoundingly says yes and they write on there, this is the best thing that's ever happened, but it's an organization that scores really low?
Yeah.
Then because the whole reason we have this matrix in place and this scoring in place is to be able to say, this is not a completely objective process. There's certainly a lot of subjectivity in it. So that's the only, is that kind of where you were going, Commissioner Hornbuckle?
Well, the
With the
we're going to
question?
vote on this today. Is that correct?
Yes, we have to stay on track.
Right. So I think it may be wise for us it may be a great idea just because it's not clear. It may be wise to pull it out and let's look at it the next go round. Just
I am
because
so okay with that because as we're talking through it, I think
it's a little
it might cause
fuzzy.
more issues than not.
Right. And I just have one more. I had 3, but I'm just going to make sure I ask one more question concerning the issue of the of scoring the staff scoring portion and how that changes the off years. Um, uh, my understanding, based upon what you were saying, is, and again, I apologize to everyone because I missed the meeting, meeting where this was discussed. I was wondering how much, what was the agreement about the scoring on the off years for the administrative scores, and how does that work? Just a little more clarity on that.
Sure. So for the off-cycle years, okay, maybe I should start before. For the year 1 of the 3-year cycle, which is this upcoming year, the process will look exactly the same as it's looked in the past, right? They will go through the panel process. It'll be that 70-30 split of panel to admin scores. We will look at those panel scores in consideration of their funding allocation and do all of the same thing basically that we've done in years past. On these off-cycle years, I haven't come up with any other way to put it, but these off-cycle years 2 and 3, we will not hold a panel process for returning applicants. Instead, receiving feedback from this committee, and honestly, receiving feedback from council, from some of our council members about, fiscal compliance or viability or contract compliance and all of that. This was one of our ways of hitting home that it is very important that organizations maintain compliance. And so again, like most things that we do, this isn't an all or nothing. It's about submitting your monthly reports on time. That came up this past year. Submitting your audits on time. That came up this past year. Maintaining that you have all of those criteria in place. And so on those off years, as we go through our allocation process, we are now weighting those administratively compliant scores onto our organizations. So essentially through this year 1, they have been sort of brought into this 3-year process. These other 2 years, it's really about maintaining compliance in their with their contracting. So it's our way of sort of leveraging that. There was another reason. The other big part of this with the 3-year cycle that is beneficial for the organization. Not only do they not have to go through a panel process every year, the other benefit of that is if they receive, and this can be definitely a part of our conversation, but if they receive a 70% from their administrative points, which is 35 out of 50, it is the intent of the program of this 3-year cycle to keep their financial support their funding relatively similar from one year to the next. That is our way of helping our organizations plan year over year, as opposed to, which is essentially kind of what we do anyway, but it's our way of leveraging more administrative points and also providing organizations with a sense of stability year over year. And that's sort of the trade-off to that.
So just so I'm repeating it, so I'm clear. So if an organization scores over 70%, that means that we would like to continue the funding as it is. And, of course, there may be other factors. So as I understand it, 100% of their scoring is going to be based upon their administrative goals going forward after the initial amount. And there's no other means of measuring how they're doing other than that scoring process. Is that correct?
That is correct. We will focus only on administrative compliance, essentially, on years 2 and 3. Now, one of the things that we went through today was, if an organization does specific things, that is reason that they may receive much less. They may receive a reduction in funding or lose eligibility. And one of those, like we spoke about, was a significant change or drastic change in their core operation, right? So we've put in here sort of these, not conditions, what's the word that I want? Stipulations that, yes, we want to support them at a similar level, given that they do well on their administrative scoring. But if it's something outside of sort of this bubble that we're talking about happens, we're giving ourselves the ability to address those issues when it comes to allocation.
Submit financial documents each year, right?
Yes.
So they still have to submit their financial documents each year. So if you had a drastic change in budget or a drastic change, which you would be able to tell the scope of operations if you had a drastic change in their like Form 990. And then the language that Glenn mentioned gives us kind of, I'm also struggling for the right word, but it's coverage to readdress it. And then I don't remember what page it's on, but the language that says that they have to comply with all the guidelines that are passed each year. We'll still go through this process every year. So if we made any changes to the guidelines that impacted those organizations, that could affect their funding. I see, Commissioner Hornbuckle, was that all of your questions or did you have more?
You answered my question. I have a comment and then I'm gonna stop.
Okay.
My comment is I understand the logic in what you're doing. The problem that I perceive is there may be an issue where the organization may have done over and above. And it will not be reflected at that part. I hope that there's some latitude, and I'll listen to the committee that that we could take other things in consideration, because there were other things that happened to organizations and they didn't get funding. So I think we should consider not just any one thing. So that's my comment.
Hold that thought, Jesse, because I have a couple of things I want to say to that, but Commissioner Truzella has had her hand up for quite a while, so let's hear from her. And I've made a couple of notes I've made a note on what you said, but hold that thought and let's come back to it. Commissioner Truzella.
Thank you. So I concur with taking out do you think the organization is worthy, or however the terminology is. It sort of reminded me of, they may win by popular vote, but the Electoral College says no. And so that's how I viewed it. Until we know more. I know where you're going with it.
Yeah.
But I think it could get us into some hot water.
This is why we do this.
Also, will the administrative score for years 2 and 3 be normalized?
Yes.
We always normalize.
Yes, we will normalize, I believe, within their tiers.
And then I know this isn't going to come as any shock, but can we raise it to 80% instead of 70%?
Yeah, so it's so funny. I thought the same thing. I thought the same thing. And I was going through to see like how much would I have to do to get to 35 points, right? And what does that look like in the proposed administrative scoring out of the 50 for that following year? And so I'm happy to hand this over for y'all to entertain that. Actually, why don't I do that
Yeah,
first before we
let's
through
talk
it?
about that a little bit because I actually had the same thought, Joe. And then one of the things that pulled me back on it was I sometimes have to remind myself the balance of our role between like being good stewards and protecting the money and not giving the money out, being good stewards, and how complicated it is for some of these organizations, especially the smaller organizations, to do some of these things. And so what I don't want to do is see us create, we want to create opportunities for success, not opportunities for failure. So where I landed on that was that for this first year, I could live with 70 and we could kind of see how everybody was performing. Because what we want, if we're going to make this big change, right, we want it to succeed. The last thing we want to have happen is to roll this out and for us to come back and go, that was a mistake. We're not going to do the 3 years. We're back on the 1 year. So I felt like, my personal opinion, I see where you're coming from. I was going there too, but my thought was maybe in the first year, we keep it a little softer and try to address it. But I could also, if the will of the committee was to get it to 80, I could live with that as well. But that was just one thought.
And I can live with that. I go back to that quality of life meeting.
Right.
Mhm.
And it's
with
not
the city
that hard.
council. Yeah, just turn in your stuff.
Yeah. Yes. I could, like I said, what does everyone else think about that? Does everybody understand the provision we're talking about? Like in years 2 and 3, the requirement is, since you're not doing the whole application, you have to get at least 70% of those 50 points. So you have to get at least 35 points, I assume normalized, or you could potentially get nothing. Teresa.
Oh, yeah, no, I get it. I think I agree with you on that in terms of, rolling it out at 70 and then seeing how people perform. If is this a good point for a question, or let other people respond to your question?
Okay, and great. I'll come back to you then. And also I want to be sure that Joe got a chance to make all of her comments or questions. Commissioner Daniel, did you have your hand up to kind of talk about the 70-80 thought, or were you? I think you're muted.
Because I was muted. I like the idea of not slow rolling it, but giving an opportunity for this to be adopted, because what I would hate is for people to like not feel like it's going to be successful and so automatically push back. I think there's going to be pushback just because people push back on things that are different. And so I'd love to be able to mitigate the things that they have to push back against, but also letting them know that we are holding them. We are going to continue to hold them to a high standard. And so, hey, we're doing this year, but next year or in the subsequent years, there's a higher expectation. Those who know more can do more.
Thank you. Commissioner Truzilla, did you have other questions or comments?
I'm good.
Commissioner Jackson.
Yeah, I was just wanting some clarification between what's on pages 12 and 16, these two separate items here that's posted. Where is it? What am I looking for? So I'm assuming he's dealing with two different things, because in one it says clearly that don't expect necessarily to get the same funding, and then the other one says that we intend to support each organization that successfully reapplies by the deadline with approximately the same, but it leaves out those other clarifying factors. So are we talking about two different things, or am I just confused?
We are, and I really appreciate you bringing that up, because they are, what you're bringing up is contradictory, but they are talking about two different things. So to clarify, on page 12, we're talking about, now that we're coming into year 1 of the 3-year process, we are starting quote unquote fresh. So Commissioner Truzilla has brought this up on multiple occasions, like this will be the year that our allocation of these funds is going to be under sort of this, I say higher scrutiny, it's always under scrutiny, but like this is the year that when we make this choice, then in years 2 and 3, given that they do well enough on their administrative scoring, we will intend to carry their funding at a similar level, right? So year 1, you are not guaranteed essentially your same funding from this current fiscal year as we move into year 1 of next year. But then years 2 and 3, those off cycles, we will do our best to provide consistent funding for their organizational planning of funds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to clarify that in the off cycle section, that it will be based off of your year 1, right? So we'll do that. Thank you for that.
Yeah, okay, that'll help it.
And while we're on that, Glenn, I had made a little note to myself on page 16. The language you use is OAC will intend to support. And I wonder if you want to say endeavor or will try or, and I actually wonder if we want to say that at all. Because once you put it in the guidelines, you know, we currently are, well, I kind of like to know how the committee feels about this. Based upon our current and past operations, it would be fair to say that if you are a COP organization, you roll into the process each year thinking that you will get at least what you have gotten in the past, and that there won't be any significant change. There won't be any significant decrease or really any decrease at all unless you mess up, don't get your application turned in, or unless we don't have the funds. And so that expectation already exists. And to some degree, that has been what has caused us problems as new organizations have come in and scored higher than historical organizations. So I don't know that we need to make a representation, but I also can understand why you would put it there, because I think there's going to be a little bit of unrest among the organizations when they read these new guidelines. I think they're going to be relieved to only have to go through it once every 3 years, but I think if it affects them negatively, they're going to be surprised. So I don't know. What do you guys think about that? I'm always careful to I try not to make anything, like once you put it out there, once you make a representation, it's harder. I mean, you've created an opportunity for somebody to rely on it. And it's harder for me to say no to them if they've relied on a representation. But I'd like to open the floor to anybody who wants to speak to that.
This is definitely the most probably bold sentence in the entire set of guidelines, honestly. And I do agree, maybe support or intend to support is not the right phrasing for that. I think what we spoke about before, while we are putting more weight behind administrative scoring in years 2 and 3, we also are attempting in some way, shape, or form to provide
predictable.
Yeah, predictability. Maybe that's the right word. Predictability for organizations as they move from year over year, right? And so then come, year 1 again, things may shift and all of that. And of course, all of this is pending appropriations, but maybe that's something we do administratively and in practice as the committee and moving forward, and not necessarily something that we put down in black and white.
We've always done that. Administratively. So
right.
I don't know. What are the thoughts of the committee about including that or not including that representation or that reassurance? Commissioner Truzilla.
I would prefer not to include it.
Got it.
So just kind of an editorial comment, guys. These guidelines and switching to this 3-tier thing will give us an opportunity to address some of I always struggle with what the correct word is, because it's not inequity as much as it is inconsistency in funding, because the historical pattern of funding, we've been reluctant to deviate from that. These guidelines will give us an opportunity to kind of look at this really holistically. But I know that Glenn and his staff have planned will plan a pretty hefty educational process to be sure everybody understands going into these guidelines, how important it is to get this application to put their very best foot forward in year 1. But I think it'll be really important for all of us and for us to encourage our fellow commissioners as we work with, as liaisons with our organizations, to provide backup for that, to be sure that the organizations understand. It could result in increased funding for some, decreased funding for others, depending upon how they score in the application process. And once that happens, it'll take 3 years to make any really significant changes.
Well, and then if I may, the idea also behind this 3-year process was to alleviate administrative burden on all parties involved, organizations, panelists, staff, as we move through years 2 and 3. One of the reasons for that too is to allow OAC staff to do a deep dive into this program to finally and truly, ideally, address the historic inequities of the program, right? When it comes to our funding programs, I think we've done a really fantastic job in our other funding programs between CAP, Culture of Value, Arts Activate, and really trying to find ways to address racial and cultural equity in our funding processes. This program, because of its nature of being this sort of legacy-based program, presents those kind of equity issues. And so it will be our job during sort of those off-cycle years when we are a little bit less administratively burdened by the program to be able to come up, hopefully, with a new solution to that for this program and see what that might look like. That's the other side of it too. So I'm just going to put that out there.
Commissioner Truzillo, your hand is still up. Did you have something else?
Yeah, so, and along those same lines, we have a leg to stand on because this was a direct order from Quality of Life. There were several council, I went back and re-listened to it again. And just because you were funded 1 year doesn't mean you should be funded the same the next. And I think this is going to require each of us talking to our council members, telling them why we are doing this. Because this is one of the biggest changes at least since I've been on the commission, same with Jesse, that we've seen in COP. This is a huge change. And then lastly, I don't think it would need to go through council again, but I do think we could benefit from a pretty detailed FAQ that attaches to this for the art groups.
That's a good idea.
That's great.
Okay, any further questions, discussion? Are we ready to call this for a vote?
So actually, if I may summarize the changes,
Yes. But yeah, I just wanted to first see does anybody have any further questions or comments or concerns? Commissioner Holomo.
Thank you. So a couple of questions. First, what was the initial reaction from some of the COP organizations regarding moving to a 3-year?
We did a survey with them, and so I'd have to look at those survey results. I probably should have included that in this. And I believe Julia had gone through it before. There was positive response on the fact that they would not need to do a panel process again, knowing also that they were not losing opportunity for more funding in the future, which is really never has been the case, right? That with the feedback that we got was, I want to apply every year if it means that I'm going to get more money, right? You as a committee are fully capable and able to always allocate more funds to any given organization, so that's not the case. They were also positively responsive on the fact that they did not have to go through a panel process every single year. So yes, we received positive feedback for that.
I would just recommend that you also include that section, probably be ahead of the staff and the committee and reducing the paperwork or the workload in general, because I think the council will probably ask about that. And then the other thought that I had, when we were faced with Orchestra of New Spain's issue, to me, it seemed very surprising that the staff was dealing with organizations that weren't always compliant with the contractual obligations on a monthly basis. Like, it was new news. And I don't know if others were surprised by that piece of fact. but I was. And so I just want to make sure that there's not going to be any subjectivity, right? Because I think that on one page, it says that the director has the discretion or can make a variance based on these things. So I just want to make sure that if an organization gets dinged because they're not meeting the monthly contractual obligation, contract compliance, those are the words that are used on page 16. Um, I just want to really be careful about that, because it seems like we, at least back then, when, we were addressing Orchestra of New Spain, that organizations weren't fulfilling their obligation. So again, if it's in the guidelines, we have to kind of move away from subjectivity, if that makes sense, because it's the staff that's going to be dealing with that, is my understanding. Right?
Yes, that's correct. That's one of the reasons actually why Julia, when she was drafting this initially, well, and we spoke about it, both of us, I just wanted to give her credit for the thought, puts in these following examples for why an organization may be disqualified from receiving funding or receive decreased funding from previous years. We've addressed both that issue and the organization that didn't come to their Q&A session.
Q&A session.
And so it allows you as a committee the ability to sort of make that decision case by case with this phrasing of may be disqualified or receive a decreased funding from previous years. So yes.
So then, sorry.
No, go.
Okay, so maybe. What are we going to do? A monthly basis, we're going to have a report of those organizations that have not been in contract compliance, and then we have to decide?
So as we execute even this year's contracts, we've just done a better administrative job, frankly. We've gone through to make sure that all of these boxes are checked before we execute even their current contract for this current year.
And I think that's an excellent point, Commissioner Halomo. I think one of the, I think really what you're speaking to is what is the underlying, inspiration is not the right word, but the underpinnings of this, of some of the rewriting of the guidelines was we've had several examples in recent years where our organizations have been out of compliance. And we've all been reluctant to pull the rug. And part of our reluctance has been, gosh, has it really been clear to them, either in the guidelines or, to be honest, some of that was during a time of turmoil in terms of the staff, where we had a bit of a revolving door for a while on the Orchestra of New Spain issue, where whoever with the staff was dealing with them, it started long before Glenn was here. It started under different directors and acting directors. And so I think one of the motivations, that was the word I was looking for, behind the sort of detailed rewrite of this, that the staff has done and that various commissioners have gone through and read and added it, was that to say things like, you may be disqualified if, so that there is a place that we can point to say, look, the rules are the rules. We really mean it. We want to create opportunities for success. We are not looking for ways to not fund organizations. We're looking for ways to fund them. But we do ask that at a bare minimum, you comply with the law and you comply with the guidelines. And so I think your point is very well taken. I think we're already on that road, just in the change in lenience from the staff and in their follow-up with organizations. Does that make sense?
It does. But again, I just, what tactics are we going to take? Like, just for example, say Dallas Opera missed a couple of months of doing their monthly reporting, right? To me, that's not in compliance with their contractual obligations, right? But if we don't hear about it, or if we don't know about it until after the end of the year, I mean.
I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so maybe one of the ways that we address this is to ask Glenn and the staff to come back to us in a future meeting in February or March, as we, because we're not going to jump into this. They'll be jumping into the application process, but I think they hear us loud and clear in saying we we want to make sure that when we insist on compliance, that we insist on it equitably across our organizations. So, we'd love for you to give us a little primer on, because we don't get involved, we don't get in the weeds as the committee, right? We are not doing the job. They're in there doing the job every day. But we might ask Glenn to take a look at this and come back to us and talk to us about what sort of reporting, formally or informally, that you will give us with respect to compliance.
Yeah, I think what we can do is, sorry, to answer your question, we do 3 compliance checks essentially a year with each organization. Well, 4. If you want to include compliance checking to make sure that they're eligible to even execute a contract, there's that. And then there's the compliance check that we do before they receive their first payment, which I believe is that obviously their contract is executed, they've submitted at least 1 monthly report, and that their insurance is in compliance. That's for their first payment. For their second payment that they receive, that they're eligible for in April, we do another compliance check to make sure that their insurance is still in compliance, that their 6 months of monthly reports have been submitted, right, from October through March have been submitted. And yeah, those are the 2 main compliance checks that we do for that. So we do, from year of year, we won't pay them. We don't even execute an invoice for them until those compliance issues are met, right? We don't do it necessarily on a monthly basis because we just don't.
Yeah, and I'm going to jump in and say, I think Glenn hears you. I think it's a very valid point, compliance, and let's keep our eye on it. Is there anything, Commissioner Holomo, that I want to keep the meeting moving because we have a pretty, we still have some pretty hefty things to address. So will that address your concern if we say the staff is hearing you on compliance and they will be reporting to us on compliance?
Yes, let me just add in closing, there are some organizations who have very, very tight, close relationships with city council members. And so ultimately, I'm thinking about what their questions might be when that organization, when Dallas Opera goes to their city council member and says, hey, I was dinged, year 2 because of this, this, and this, but in year 1, we didn't quite make it. So, there's the subjectivity, right? It's not concrete. So I just want to leave it at that. And thank you.
Excellent. And hopefully this is like a new mark, like a new watermark, right? We're moving forward with the new guidelines. Commissioner Jackson.
Ma'am, I just wanted to let you and Glenn know that I have a hard stop at 5:30.
Okay.
I don't know if that was communicated previously.
Thank you for reminding me. So I am going to ask Glenn to quickly summarize what our changes are so that we can entertain a motion. Unless anybody has any further questions or discussion. Okay. There being no further questions or discussions, Glenn, if you could briefly summarize, and then at that point I can entertain a motion from the floor regarding these moving forward with these guidelines.
Great. So we're going to talk about things that are different from the draft that you have. So the first is going to be that maintaining program eligibility on page 16, which is that language right there that I've included. It's not in your draft, but this will be included in the updated draft. Then what we've discussed today is removing the overall recommendation, that yes or no support vote, as part of panel scoring, and that's on page 9. So we'll take out that section for the overall recommendation, that couple lines. And then on page 16, we will take out that final sentence that begins with OAC will intend to support all the way through that 70% of administrative points. So we're taking that out so as to not create any confusion or set us up for something that is not feasible in the future. So I appreciate that. Those, I believe, are the only two content changes that I've seen.
Commissioner Truzilla.
You're going to take out that line about whether you think there should be funded or not.
Yes, on the panel scoring on page 9, the overall
page 9,
recommendation,
okay.
yes, that will go out. And then that final sentence on page 16 of the returning applicants, OAC will intend to support each organization, that full sentence will also be deleted. And I believe that was all the changes.
Okay, so at this point, I could entertain a motion regarding the COP guidelines. Commissioner Daniel.
Make a motion to accept the COP guidelines with the revisions and adjustments that were just outlined.
I second.
Okay, we have a motion from Commissioner Daniel and a second from Commissioner Truzilla. All in favor? Any opposed? The motion has passed unanimously.
Great.
Okay, so the next thing on our agenda is the discussion of the reallocation of the Dallas Black Dance Theater funds to other OAC programs. And I will recognize Assistant Director Ayers on this topic.
Still sounds
love
weird.
that.
It just sounds so weird. I'm just like, it's just a job. Okay. All right. Jesus. All right. So today is just a discussion. We're not voting on anything. I think after conversations with Chair Bragalone, we decided that if we do want to vote on anything,
And Chair Hornbuckle.
and I'm sorry, and Vice Chair Hornbuckle, if we do vote on anything, we'll bring it back to you in February. But I wanted to have a discussion on our Dallas Black Dance funding reallocation of the $248,435. I went back to the meeting to look up specifically what the motion was from Chair Ridley. And it was to remand the dollar amount of funding recommendation to the Arts and Culture Advisory Commission's allocation committee for reallocation to other OAC programs for fiscal year 24-25. Now, taking into consideration this body's recommendation that we focus in on Alana artists and organizations and their programming and the communities that they serve, I have put together with the guidance and feedback of Chair Bragalone and Vice Chair Hornbuckle, a proposed reallocation for discussion. So from my perspective, I am trying not to overload any one particular staff member or team by just throwing them an extra 250,000, because that's a lot, right? If we look at the spread of work on this, this would have been one contract execution for a bunch of services. We are now talking about multiple contracts and multiple requisitions, right? So the administrative burden of this is now much more than it initially would have been, right? So I'm trying to spread the level a little bit on this. I think Commissioner Harlow had a question.
Commissioner Honolulu, do you have a question? I saw it.
Yes. I'm not familiar, or what is the cultural center project proposed?
We're going to get to that in just a minute.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you.
So Glenn has made a recommendation with 4 existing programs, but there's a new program, and I was going to ask you to elaborate on that. Did you have something else you wanted to say before you got to that?
No.
Okay.
I was just going to talk about this table.
Okay, great.
I'm pulling that up, and I meant to do that earlier. Silly me. Okay. So I've spoken with Rhonda and her purview with community arts. That's where I started first. Because she always can use a little extra funding for the community artist program for CAP to help supplement the current roster. We're not trying to add new artists or anything like that, but instead supplement funding for artists essentially that have run out of funding or will very soon to keep their work going into the communities, right? So we have that 20,000 she has sort of requested, if you will. And then I can also pull these up, but there are various projects which include I believe one is summer programs, arts residencies. Another is
The vacant space program.
I'd have to pull it up. And then another one is for the AAPI festival at the bathhouse to throw a little bit more money there, right? So a few projects, and we can drill down. She's done an itemized sort of list of those. I just didn't want to provide all of the information all at once. For community arts projects. The Joint Cultural Center project, which we'll talk about in just a second. Culture Value, putting in another 50,000. So the total for that program will be 150,000 for this year, which adds another 15, I think, projects for that. And then Arts Activate Round 3 is just essentially the remainder of the funds at about 92,000, which will be 9, 10 contracts, depending on artists and organizations. So that's that split. So I'm giving a little extra funding in there because we can, but that's what that's looking like. So let me pull up go ahead.
While you're pulling that up, I want to jump in and say what we had hoped, given that we had such a heavy agenda today, what Commissioner Hornbuckle and I had hoped is we wanted Glenn to bring you sort of generally what he was thinking. The proposal that we'll vote on will have more detail about various projects. Like, we could have Rhonda come and talk about what specific community arts programs she would put the 50,000 to. But we wanted to get kind of a general feeling from the committee about spreading it around. And what Commissioner Hornbuckle and I asked Glenn and his staff to do was to, we're mindful of the work on the staff, to focus on getting as much of it in the hands of Alana artists as possible, and to do it in a way that hopefully Dallas Black Dance Theater will be able to come back into the program, and that money will not be counted on by any particular organization. We're trying to make this, keep this as flexible as possible to see what happens in the next round of COP applications, whether that's the next round or 2 rounds or 3 rounds, but for this year to try to keep it very flexible. Commissioner Hornbuckle, did you want to share anything in that regard?
I just wanted to see if the chair is interested in a straw vote at this point. I mean, not at this point, but before the meeting is over, just to see
Yes.
where everybody stands.
Yes, I think that would be great. If we can have Glenn explain this project and then hear from anybody who wants to comment on what their thoughts are about how the money might be used, and then kind of move through that pretty quickly so that we can get to the Arts Activate program guidelines. Because do we have a time constraint on that one too? That one has to go to commission.
It will, but we have time for those guidelines. We're not pressed.
They don't have to go at this meeting.
No.
That's right. Yeah, I did want to say, if we don't get to the Arts Activate guidelines, we can do them in the February meeting if we need to, because we're not pressed to get them to the commission in the January meeting.
Chair,
Yes.
Dr. Jackson had a question whether we have a quorum with or without her.
Yes, we
Yes,
do.
we do.
Okay.
I
Dr.
don't
Jackson?
need that now. I just needed to step out for a second to check on my puppy.
And I know you have a hard stop, so if you want to weigh in with your thoughts on this, 5:30, right, is your hard stop?
Yes.
If you have, before Glenn, he's going to give an explanation of this joint cultural center project, but if you want to weigh in and give us your thoughts about this proposed reallocation before you have to step out, I will recognize you now so that we'll have the benefit of that wisdom. We're not voting on anything today.
Right. No, I think that Glenn has done a great job with divvying it up. I am curious about the Joint Cultural Center project, so I've got 10 minutes or so.
Either way.
Great. So Rafael Tamayo, our manager over at OC3, brought this proposal to me some time ago, and this presented itself as a great opportunity to help, find a source of funds for it. So it's with Joel Salazar, who's sort of operating under Two Fresh Productions, LLC. He will provide 9 dance workshops and presentations that will culminate in a dance festival of his own original curriculum, choreography, music, and movement that explores urban dance as a part of the quote-unquote Cypher Dallas programming series with OAC. This will be at all 4 cultural centers as well as Spring Hills Rec Center. And the final festival presentation will take place here at the LCC. So I thought this was a nice, one very specific project that we could call out. It engages all 4 of our cultural centers and the communities that they serve. I thought that was very appropriate as well. And because it's sort of a higher ticket item, it made sense to sort of use this as a nice line item in this funding allocation since we had the funds this year. It's a one-time project. It's not, so we're not like finding ourselves in the trap of not having sustainable funding for a particular program. So it seemed kind of appropriate for this.
Did you say Singing Hills?
I did. Spring Hills Rec Center.
Where is Spring Hills?
It's a great question.
Julia would have known.
Yeah, Julia probably would have known. And sorry, I'm not her.
Are you getting Spring Hills confused with Singing Hills?
Maybe. I might need to ask. Oh, it might be Singing Hills. I'll have to get clarification from Rafael about that.
Yeah, I think it's Singing Hills.
Yeah,
Singing
because I pulled up Spring Hill. That's in Fairfax County somewhere.
Yeah, probably Singing Hills.
Okay.
Get clarity on that.
So questions, comments, thoughts about this proposed reallocation? And then Glenn will bring us something more specific for a vote next meeting. Commissioner Truzillo.
Shocker, but 33% is automatically guaranteed not to be in North Dallas. So I would hope that we would focus some of the other funding projects to be spread out throughout the city.
Great point. So to your point, and I think what council in general will be pleased to hear is that things are happening in their district, right? Also understanding that Dallas Black Dance provides a lot of programming across the city. So that was a thought process. Some of that will be addressed with the community artist program. Most of it, the majority will be addressed with cultural value as we do that. And maybe what we do is put more cultural value projects. So, right, this past year we did 2 in every district, I think, at least. There were a couple that had 3. And I am very happy to work with staff to try to make sure we get more in our northern districts. If that's
Great. And I do appreciate the fact that the joint project is dance related.
Yes, me too.
So thank you.
So that was a nice coincidence.
One of our thoughts, Commissioner Truzillo, when Commissioner Hornbuckle and I were speaking to staff about it, was to be sure that we're trying to use this money to do the same thing that it would have, or a similar thing to what it would have done if it had gone to the COP organization that it was originally awarded to. With the thought being that what we're really concerned about is the impact on the citizens. We're obviously concerned about the impact on organizations, but what we're really concerned about at this point is, since council has chosen for it not to go out into the community through Dallas Black Dance, that we still try to get similar programming in front of the audiences that would have been served by that organization. But yeah, cultural value provides a great opportunity to sort of focus some things in particular districts, because the 100,000 that's already in that budget gets us 2 projects in every district and 3 in some. Commissioner Hornbuckle.
Arts Activate is all over the city, isn't that correct?
Yes.
Yes.
And so $92,000 would go there. So there's a good chance that it'll be all over from north, south, east, and west.
That is correct. And actually, it'll be, if we do address it today as a part of our discussion on next year's guidelines, I'm excited to have that conversation. But yes, you're absolutely right. There's nothing specifically that causes us to pinpoint a particular district, but yes, those projects will take place all over.
That's an excellent point. And, you know, one of those, one thing on that, Commissioner Truzillo, and I just don't know how we fix this problem, we don't get a lot of applications. And so whatever you and your council person and whatever staff can do to help you to motivate more applications, because that's a huge chunk of money that, with some good applications coming in to provide services in your district and other northern sectors, there's a great opportunity. And it's a great opportunity because it's a one-time opportunity. And if those artists get it and they perform in those districts now, then we can expect to have them come back in future years. Even though our funding will be less, it could be an opportunity to have a chance to motivate more applications, because we're going to be able to make more awards in that round. Commissioner Lomo.
And I'd like to say I support it.
Thank you. Commissioner Lomo.
Just to piggyback on what you had mentioned, Chair, could we maybe identify some artists for Commissioner Truzillo's district and try to do a test pilot that also gauges the response with attendance, and then, you know, really sit down with the artists and say, okay, you know, what happened, right? What were some of the challenges? Just because you're right, you know, we're not getting artists who are applying from that district to do things in that district. Is it a lack of venue? Is it a lack of space? Is it, you know, can we use any of this money to help jumpstart that district specifically with a pilot? That's my question.
Commissioner Truzillo, I'll call on you in just a second, but one of the things we're trying to avoid doing is creating any new programs, in part because of the burden on the staff. And then when you kind of put your mind to it and you start thinking about it, there are all sorts of questions that come up about how to do that equitably and meet our overall goal, which is to replace the programming. You know, the money didn't go to the organization because of actions on the part of the organization. But we want to make sure it is that the community that would have received those services doesn't suffer as a result of what happened organizationally. And so the sort of conventional wisdom between Commissioner Hornbuckle, myself, and Glenn and his staff was that it would be in fact, we were a little reluctant even on the Joint Cultural Center program, that it really would be better, especially if you go back and listen to what City Council said about, you know, reallocation to other arts and culture programs. We're really resisting the creation of a new program of any sort. That said, I think that all applies to creating a pilot program, but there are certainly ways that staff and commissioners and council members and residents can really take some steps to encourage more participation from that sector in these existing programs. And the way that that's different from the past is that you've got all these new people coming in and doing applications for the first time, and maybe they don't score high enough and they get discouraged. And so they go 2 or 3 rounds before they get there. With this extra $92,000 in Arts Activate, I predict that we'll be able to go a lot farther down in the pool. I'm hoping that we have enough applications that score well enough, because you have to get to a minimum point but I think that we probably will. Commissioner Truzilla, I saw your hand and Commissioner Hornbuckle's go up at the same time, and then yours went down. Did
Yeah,
you have something
you addressed what I was going to say.
Thank you. Commissioner Hornbuckle.
I was going to suggest what Glenn was suggesting within the purview of the programs we have right now. There are several artists that could be encouraged to, I mean, I know you can't tell them what to do, but there could be a way to point them in the direction of that district, or give some incentives, because I know Rhonda would have her finger on the pulse in terms of people all over the city, or artists all over the city, and organizations that would have programs that would fit in, especially Arts Activate. I just see that's $90,000 going to a lot of artists that would be excited to go to that district. But you know, they have to be maybe pointed in that direction. I don't know how that part works, but I would hope that they would do it under the programs that already exist. That way we don't get into a lot of eyes on the on this process.
Thank you, Commissioner Hornbuckle. Commissioner Halomo.
Thank you. Just point of clarification. I use the word pilot, but I'm looking at the list that's here, and I was proposing something from this list, like Arts Activate, like Commissioner Hornbuckle said. I don't want to create another program, so just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, let me ask this. How does everybody, just as Commissioner Hornbuckle suggested, a kind of straw poll, how does everybody feel about how Glenn and his team have allocated this among these various programs? Any comments or suggestions to him? Do we all feel pretty good about it?
Yep.
Okay, so you feel like if he comes back with the kind of more specific details, we'd be able to vote on this next month and get that moving on down the road and get the money into the hands of the artist. Great. Need anything else? Okay, so now the next question is, we have on the agenda proposed changes for Arts Activate. We have lost Commissioner Jackson, but we do still have a quorum. Glenn, would it take you 10 minutes to go through these changes maybe?
Yeah, there's really nothing significantly different. Really what I was going to do today is just confirm some of the conversation we had, so I can make a nice updated draft for you all for the February meeting, basically.
Right. So we won't vote until the February meeting, but can everybody stick with us a little bit longer? I think we can still finish before 6, and let's let Glenn run through them. So that'll be kind of, it'll sort of charge your brains to be thinking about these changes when you get the drafts before the next meeting. Okay?
Great.
Take it away, Glenn.
So before we proposed that COP organizations receiving above 70,000 cannot apply. It's currently 100. So you all gave some feedback that we increase that to 80. We'll look at that. We're moving from 75-25 panel to staff to 70-30 as far as scoring is concerned. We're raising, or we are now limiting, or this is one of the discussions, to funding once per year. And then, of course, making our applicants post to go see DFW as part of their deliverables, rather than just providing a flyer, will again help promote our arts and culture, and then help us continue to justify how we might allocate future hot funds. Here is the change in impact from last meeting to now. I gave you sort of a table of what it would look like for organizations who had applied over the past couple of years that were in COP that received over 70. Now I've changed it to just over 80, right? So we had four organizations that would still be eligible. So I took them out of this. All these other organizations in COP are the ones that receive 80 or above that would essentially lose eligibility to apply for the program. Right. And then you'll see in Arts Activate 24 funding and Arts Activate 25 funding if they've even received funds in those particular years. And so Karamia has, Dallas Holocaust received it in 24. They applied in round 2, but did not get funded. Dallas Theater Center did not get funded in 24 and has not applied in 25. Forest Forward was not funded. They were a new COP organization and have not applied this year. Anyway, so far and so forth. Basically, the change is that we have 50,000, or would have 56,000 in 2024, and currently 30,000 in year 2025 that we could have given to other organizations or artists instead. So that could have been, for this year, for example, 3 or 4 other artists could have received funding, or 2 or 3 Group A organizations, right, with those dollars. So that's what that looks like if we change the COP limit from 100 to 80,000. Okay. 70 to 30, we're taking 5 points away from the panel. They're still going to consider the cultural plan priorities, but that's just going to be rolled into the 20 points of the intention score for panel. We discussed last time what those 5 points might be for the administrative score, and I received 2 options. One might be for new applicants, so those, and we sort of drilled down on what a new applicant is. Might receive 5 points to help us continue to fund new applicants who are coming into the program to give them a little bit of a boost. Or, and this is what I was talking about earlier, the districts with fewest proposed events. And so this is what I meant by, I'm excited to talk about this with Commissioner Trezilla's advocacy for her district and the northern districts, is that if what we do is look at all of the proposed events for that particular application round, and whatever district has the fewest, we would give those 5 points. This would take a little bit of play and like some scenario running to try to figure out how that might work, because there might be multiple districts that have 0 proposed events. So it might just take a little bit of, what does that look like? How does that mean, right? Something like that. But those were sort of the 2 options there. So if we did have any feedback today, it might be to look at this, or we can just speak this through in our next meeting and see what that might look like. But I did like the district with few proposed events because it could help with sort of location equity, if you will. Oh, go ahead.
Any comments or questions so far? Commissioner Truzilla.
I love that. I absolutely love that, not just from my district, but the surrounding districts as well. And I think how we could really capitalize on that is if we communicated that to the new applicants, saying, hey, there's 5 extra points if you go to these underserved areas.
Commissioner Hornbuckle.
I think Commissioner Trezilla said it better than anybody. So
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to dig into that one. And we'll keep new applicants in the back pocket, but we'll dig into this one and see what that might look like then. Great. This received positive feedback, funding changing from a couple of individual artists and Group A organizations were eligible to receive funding twice in a year to changing that to everyone just receives funding once in a year. And this gives us, again, the opportunity to fund more different varied artists and organizations through the year. So in Arts Activate 2024, we funded 11 artists and organizations twice. That was 7 artists and 4 organizations. I showed you that breakdown of who of those were Alana or identified as Alana. I mentioned in our last meeting, I am not concerned with that having a disparate impact on our percent of funding towards Alana artists and organizations, because historically, as we've seen, our top scoring organizations and artists, vast majority are Alana artists and organizations. So in fact, I think we will continue to support more Alana artists and organizations because we are spreading the love, if you will.
Thoughts from the committee on sticking with that proposed change, funding once per year? Everybody good with that? Okay.
That's it. Was that 10 minutes?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I don't want to get into the weeds of that, but it could get pretty tricky. But you know, that's a longer conversation about organizations being funded multiple times, because you could really change it to an individual, you could change the organization, but you know, we experienced that with one person in the past. So I think getting into the weeds of that could be one thing we're going to have to do at some point.
I think that one is a tough call, right? I think we're called to do both, support our artists and organizations, our small orgs, and the idea of funding them twice is really attractive. But I think we're also called to spread our funding to as many as we can. I think what that means is as we look at our budgeting for next year, how do we grow the program? Period. I think that's what it is.
And I think another thing to remember about these guidelines is we do this every year. So if we give this a try, because we have in every round of Arts Activate, we have all walked out of here a little bit sad about some programs that we were unable to reach down and fund. Every time there have been 2 or 3 or 4 in each round, sometimes as many as 5, that people on the committee expressed, knew the artist, knew the program, had read the proposal, and we just didn't, we're not talking about reaching down to those that score below 70 or whatever our minimum is, but every round there are organizations that score high enough to qualify, but they don't get the money. And if we find that that is not the case, if we go through this one time and, we're going to free up some money both from, we're going to have some organizations that are unhappy with this change, organizations that are used to getting both COP money and getting an Arts Activate program funded. We're going to free up some money there. We're going to free up some money with this. And if it doesn't work this year, if we don't find that we're able to fund additional quality artist and arts programs, well, then we can go back next year and say, you know what, we were wrong. We missed being able to provide that additional funding to, we have a number of artists in the city that we suffered because they didn't get to do 2 projects, or we have some organizations that the city suffered because we weren't able to get their additional programming, and we can go back and look at it. But it's worth a try since we've gone round after round after round where there are artists and programs that deserve to be funded that aren't funded. So
we can also take into consideration as we go into our COP allocation process, these organizations here that will lose eligibility for our Arts Activate because we're lowering that threshold. We can absolutely look at that and see, is that something to take into consideration for funding allocation for COP?
Might be a question to ask on the application if they proceed. Well, we'll be able to look it up.
All right.
Okay, staff updates?
Staff updates. Just a little update on the allocations calendar. February, we will bring Arts Activate guidelines. We'll probably say briefing and maybe recommendation, but definitely briefing the guidelines for a new updated draft, and same for CAP guidelines. We'll brief on that. And then we'll need to vote on those in the March meeting. And then I've just listed our next few meetings, April 3, May 1, and June 5. That's all.
Okay, and I do not have any chair updates or announcements, or if I do, they are not in my brain. It has been a crazy day for me. Does anyone else have any updates or information they would like to share with the committee? Okay, well, thank you very much for this hard work. We had two very big topics today that we got through. I always appreciate the hard work of this committee. Again, I apologize for starting the meeting a little bit late. All business of the committee being concluded, I call this meeting to adjournment at 5:42 p.m. Thank you all very much.
Good job.
Bye, thank you.
All right.